So we are back again to our app again, and in this session we want to do something very unique again, right? We want to learn another thing, a very new thing that's working with UUID. But then before that, we have to do some stuff to actually understand the progress so far. So but before that, I have a small exercise for you. So in the previous session, there's another column called age that comes after phone number, right? And they were all shown in the database, but I've removed it because I don't need age in this app that I'm building. So I'm giving the challenge for you to also delete that age option, run migrations or run Alembic in such a way that you have a format like this. And this is the current state of my database. So only phone number is the newest thing in the database. So finally, currently that's what we have. So and then also activate your virtual environment, and this time we want to run the app itself. We want to run the Uvicorn again. So you need to cd into the app. Make sure you're at the app level. Then we run this thing. So now I'm coming to run the Uvicorn as usual. So I'm running that. Wow, we are facing an issue. They say no module named app. Let me put this in app. They say no module named app. And where do we find that? They say db modules underscore py line 2 of that. So in the db I'm already in the db already. They say line 2 of that. So this is my line 2, and they say they cannot recognize app. But do you remember how that app came up while we added it? Initially we were having something like this. That's from database import base, but then now we have something like app dot database. But the app dot database telling us that no module name app, right? So why do we even need this? Why do we even need this app? Because Alembic, when we're running Alembic needed the full part. Alembic needed the full part in order to work with this particular thing. That's why we were having app.database from Alembic. If you remove it right now, see the this thing, this is going to run very well. So it's going to favor the files that are inside here, but it's not going to favor Alembic if you remove it, right? So we need to keep it app.database. But if you bring it, Alembic will be sorted, but then the rest of the files will not be sorted, especially the database will not be sorted. How do we solve this module issue? This is a module issue. Currently, our system is actually seeing every file, every folder as just a folder itself. But Python wants to run them. Python will run modules. Python doesn't run folders, right? Python doesn't run folders, but it's run modules. So what we needed to be doing is that, remember when we were in Alembic, we went to version.py, we imported something like this at the top, this part thing. That's what we imported into our Alembic file, and then we were able to use that app.app.app. So app, even though a folder, is now seen as a module. That's why it was working in that case. But right now, when we open this and we enter our db underscore modules, the issue is that we want to run this file, but not from Alembic. We are not running from Alembic, but we are running from the file itself, from the main. The main is trying to access something in the database model, and the database model is also depending on this particular one, right? So the issue that we have right now is, how do we solve this issue? We don't need to be copying that OS, importing OS, what we did in Alembic, in every file that we want to do importing module. How do we solve that general issue? So to solve that general issue, first we go to the root, right? You make sure you are outside the app, your arrow is outside the app. Then we are going to create a file, another file aside the secret file. We are going to add another file here at this level. So we are going to call it setup.py file. This file is going to allow us to make sure that our entire project, especially most of the folders in the project, are seen as modules, so that when we are doing importation, it is easy for us, so that Python will not be seeing them as folders, but will be seeing them as modules, even though in reality they are folders. So we need to convert them. So we need to do entire setup for the whole project, right? So that Python will be using them as modules instead. Okay, how do we do this setup? So basically, first we need to do this, import the setup tools from setup tools. We are going to import a function called setup, and then another called find packages. This down one, find packages. We need these two, but then there's an issue. They said that import setup tools could not be found, right? We don't have that currently, so we need to run it. To run that, what should I do? See, I'm going down here. I'm coming to stop the running this thing for now. Control C. I stop running it, but then we need to resolve this issue for now. We don't have it in our system, in our virtual environment basically, so we need to install it. How do we install stuff? You say pip install setup tools, right? So I'm installing that. I hope it works. Yeah, it is working. Yes, yeah, it has worked. So it has been installed. See, automatically the problem is gone, right? But remember, whenever we install something, we need to do pip freeze, because we want to send it into the requirement.txt file. .txt, let it be stored over there for us as well. So it's done. Yeah, if you go there, you see it in the setup tool, but then we don't have time to go back over that again, right? Let me clear to have everything fresh. Now we have the setup tool installed, but how do we use it? We are going to say setup is a function. You open the bracket. It's going to take some number of arguments, quite some number of arguments. So first, the name of the app, right? So let me, it's a string called expense dash tracker. That's the name of the project that we are building right now, because we are doing a setup of the entire system. We are setting it up so that it will run as if it will run it as if it's an executable file or an executable app basically. So we are going to do version equals to, so we can give a version to our app. Let's say is 0.10, a 0.1.0. That's the very first version that we are saying that that's what we are going to give. And we are going to another one called packages is equal to find packages. It's going to help us easily store all the packages. So whenever there is any package, it will, this particular one will detect it and make it as a package instead of Python seeing it as a module basically. It says something is not close. This guy is not close. Okay, yeah, so I know why. So there should be comma here. Yes, so there should be comma before the next one. So find packages also follow up. Hey, this thing should be worrying, right? Let me repeat apply. Yes, so this is all we have from our setup stuff, right? But then see, we need to do something. We need to run something. We need to run a particular script to allow the system to do all the setup for us. Right now we just brought the setup file. But then we need to do something. We need to come back to the roots, because this setup is at the roots of our app. It's not inside the app, so we need to come back. So if you want to go back, we do cd dot dot, right? Yeah, cd dot dot, because now we are at the expense tracker app. At the expense tracker app, we can see the setup file. Because of that setup file, what we will do is that we are going to do pip install as an executable file, right? Dot. The dot means everything is inside the same directory. Basically, pip install -e dot. So right, so I'm running this. So basically what we are doing here again is just making sure that the entire project is seen as an executable and editable file for us basically. So this is what we have. We say successfully installed. My machine is going low. Successfully installed expense tracker version 0.10, the one we set over here. So the setup file is done. So now we can go back. So the entire project is now set up. Basically, it's going to be seen as an app, actual app by Python. So this app, for example, will be seen as module. But that's not all, right? After doing the setup file, what you do is that whatever you want the system to see as a module, right, instead of a folder, instead of whatever you want Python to see as a module instead of a folder, you need to go inside. So this, I have an app, right? If you open it up, I've introduced a new file called init, and that's, let me clean it and delete it for you again. So you go inside the app here, right? I'm on the app, so you select the app folder, then you click on new file. So when I click new file, we say underscore initialize init underscore again dot py. Yes, so you don't put anything inside. It's an empty file. Let's leave it empty for now. So we now have our app, and the app has an init. So it means that this particular app is going to be seen as a module. So wherever you see, wherever you put init inside, right, the setup will be seeing it as a module all the time, right? Basically, that's what we did currently. Okay, so we have the setup file running now. So when we go back, we don't need to be writing those OS part, setting part every time, but the system is set up automatically for us because of this setup file. Okay, now let's go to database model. So when we run it, you shouldn't have this issue again, because right now the app name, which is or was originally folder, will now be seen as a module by Python itself. So both the Alembic and both our modules will all be seeing this thing as just a normal module, right? So that problem has been solved. Let's clear and now cd into the app again, where we wanted to run Uvicorn. Where is Uvicorn? Yes. So I'm running Uvicorn. Yeah, so it's now complete. You see that it's now complete, right? So let's go to our front end. Let's go to our front end, and then we will refresh. Now this is what we have now. We still have our things, the same thing, create user and stuff. We still have them. So now we are seeing that if I do try it out, see what's going to happen. Password, email, last name, and this, but we don't have the phone number that I just added to the as part of the requirement. So where do we think that in our project do we set up how data will come in? Is going to be in the pydantic model. So I have PD models here. I'm going to PD models, and then this is user in. For the user in, I need to add another thing called phone number. So it's phone number. Yes, phone number. And it's going to be a string. I'm going to set it as a string as well. So phone number is going to be a string as well. That will be the user in. To the user out, what do you think? I can send phone number. I can send phone number out, right? So phone number as a string can also go out. So this is a user out. So let's go back, refresh our front end. So I'm refreshing this, and now I'll try it out. So you can see phone number is added. So let's create a new user. Let's create a new user. Let's say Emil Joe at, so Emil at gmail.com. The password 123456. Phone number, let me just put anything there, right? So this is a phone number. So I'm going to execute. Let's see if you have internal server error. So let's go to database and see what's happening. They said input should be a valid string, but we have inputted none for phone number. The input should be a string, but then they say we put none there. So let me see what we have here. Yeah, so this is the issue. Let's go to our main file. So if you come to our main file, you see that when we receive the data, we are creating a user model. There's password, right? But we didn't add it here. So when we do comma phone number is equal to user dot phone number, basically. So you need to add this one because we have added it. It's a new column, so we needed to update it over here as well. So we go back and then we run this system again. So internal server error again. So let's go back again. The issue that we have there will be what? Password then user ID. So the issue is that the email as this thing already exists, right? So let's go to our database and see what is happening there. Let me refresh. So the email already exists, so and then the phone number was now. So the first time that we said it was created, but just that we were using the same email because email should be unique and we are using the same email for it. The first one, it was created with phone number now. So what we are going to do is that let's go to the front end, change the name. Yeah, email Joe. This one, let me do joe@gmail.com. Run it, execute it. Now we have something coming out for us, right? So we understand why all those things happen. Let's go to the database and refresh again. So yeah, there's a new email with a new phone number, and then this is their own. The first time we ran email, we had an issue was because we didn't put anything null over there, so it had an issue. But then it still created the rest of the stuff. But here was null, so we just move on like that. But here we wanted this one to be compulsory. We are going to do more thing to make restrictions work. But right now we are just doing the basics, right? So now we've created a new user. Now the focus here is that look at the front end. What is returning us is id equals 6, and this id can be used by the front end. We are fine. So the front end will be retrieving these things, and then the ib will just be integers 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that. So if the integer is in this form, and then don't you think that it's easy for people to use this id? Usually we use the ids to go and delete stuff from the back end. We usually use the id to delete stuff from the back end, so people can just guess numbers and use it to delete stuff from your backend system. So it's not appropriate to be using id, to be setting id as integer in thorough applications, right? Unless it's simple application we are in. But for thorough applications or industrial application, we don't use just integers as id. We have a more robust and a more secure way of creating the id in the database. So what's going to happen now is that we need to recreate our table. So that's what we should have done. But here, for the purpose of learning, we just started with an integer for id. Actually, that's not what should happen normally. So that's what we were coming to do. So there's something called universally unique identifier. That's what UUID, right? Let me show this here. So first, you have to import the one from Python and the one that SQLAlchemy also knows about, because SQLAlchemy will use it, send it to the backend, and then say that the ID is going to create the ID. So first, if you do import UUID, this one, it is the Python import here. Import, so it's the Python UUID. This is the Python UUID. But then you see SQLAlchemy communicate with both Python and then backend, right? So we need to import something, the UUID for the format of SQLAlchemy, so that it can understand that and then use it to create the UUID in the actual backend for us. So what you will do is that we said from SQLAlchemy dot dialects is like language, right? Yeah, dot PostgreSQL, right? Import UUID. So we are going to import the UUID. Okay, so what will happen is we will not need this primary key again for the distance. We are going to use the UUID format. So we say that the data type which comes first, data type should be a UUID data type, but you have to open it and they say as underscore UUID equals to true. What does it mean equals to true? So this UUID, we don't want it to be seen by the backend as a string, just a normal string, but we want the backend to treat it as an actual UUID stuff, so that it will be handled like that. So we set it as true. So it is UUID, all right, but then setting this as UUID itself as true makes the backend not to see it as a string, but actually see it as a coded something, right? That's why we needed that. And also we need to actually set a default one. So we say default. So default means that when we don't specify the ID of the user, sometimes we can say that some of the system you can decide to at the front end you define how the model should look like, or you define how the ID will look like from the front end. But then by default, we want to rely on the UUID format. The UUID, universally a unique identifier, is something that is universally accepted and very strong, right? Follows a particular algorithm to create a very specified unique object for every object that you create into your database. That is why it's very strong, right? We need to rely on this one. So by default, if we say default, it's going to use a UUID dot UUID4, UUID4, right? The standard one, the standard one. If you depend on this, what will going to happen is that it means that by default the system itself will be generating the UUID for you automatically. That's why we need to set the default to UUID. But if you specify the UUID from the front end, it will ignore this and then use the one that you send from the back end, but from the front end, sorry. But if you leave it, the default one will be using the actual UUID from the Python, right? So Python will be computing the UUID and give it to the SQLAlchemy, and the SQLAlchemy will go back to the backend and treat it as UUID itself instead of just a string. So this is the format that we needed to change. This is what we needed to change so that the ID is not just an integer but something else. Okay, now if we change this particular UUID from the, we should have done this from the beginning. We should have actually done this from the beginning, but now we have made change, right? This particular change, Alembic will not be able to solve it for us because this ID is a primary key. It's a primary key. So from the beginning, we should have made this approach, but I didn't want to confuse you at that point. I wanted her to take it slow. So we are going to stop using, for every ID, we are going to stop using that integer directly, except it is very important for us to do it for some simple stuff. But right now, it's not going to be an integer, it's going to be a special ID, right? So for that matter, we need to clear the table. Of course, if you are doing new projects, new whatever, we are going to be clear on what we are doing, and the ID is going to be directly UUID. We are not going to use integer. So at this point, we need to clear our current table and start using stuff now, using the UUID for our IDs now. So let's see that in action. So first, let's go to our database. We need to go to our database, right click on users, right? And then you delete the table. I'm going to delete this table. So I've deleted it, right? So let me refresh the tables, so there's Alembic versions as well. I'm going to leave it, or let me just leave it, or it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so we have tables right now for under table. So let's leave it like that. So now the table is cleared because we are now doing a new format using the UUID rather. So we are going to the front end now. Refresh and create new users, new set of users again. So I'm trying it out again. So currently there is no one in the database. So basically that's what happened. So let me refresh the database because changes have been made, right? Okay, let me stop this and run this again. Control C, and then let me run the app again. You have to run the app again. So yeah, so you needed to run that app again for, so we go to the database. Let me refresh the tables. Refresh tables. Let me refresh table. I'm not seeing this thing itself. So under tables, right? I wanted to see my created tables. It's not coming. So basically, I'll just, it's not here. It's not here. So I'm refreshing. It's not coming. So let me close, leave this, right, and open my pgadmin again. I need to see that. I need to see the table inside because it should have been created by now and be ready. So the issue that we have currently is our import issue. We are having an import issue again. So the problem is that the base that we are using to create the tables, right? The base is coming from directly from the database connection file. This is it. This is the database connection file. We are importing it directly from here. But it will not be created, or the table will not be created if we don't remember in the DB mode where our models are. The thing is to recognize this is the model base, this is the model that we are using, right? And then we have imported base over here as well. So right, so base is also in this file and base is also in this file as well. But then if you import base from here, it means that the base that is using we are using to create the tables will be referring to the base from the database, and then in that database the models are not here, so it will assume the model never existed. But then if you import the base that we have imported here, right, from through, if you import the base through the DB models, so when it comes here it will see the database model itself, and then use it to create the table for us. So it depends also on where you are importing the thing from. So base needs to see where it is importing from, so we need to remove it from here. That we are not going to import the base through the database, we are going to import to the DB models. So comma base. So if you do that, that's going to create the table for us. This is going to create the tables for us, right? So I just put this try an exception to in order to make sure that the tables are created rightfully. So right, you can put this in around it. This one we are going to talk about errors things. I'm taking this step by step. We are going to talk about how to handle errors and things later on, but right now we are just figuring out how to go about the stuff mostly. Okay, so this is sorted. This is sorted, right? So if you go to our database, we should see the tables created, and it is created. If I collapse it, I can see users here. So let me open it, refresh it, and say all rows. So all rows, yeah, so we have ID, email, first name, last name, password, and phone number. So I'm going back to the front end, and now I want to execute this now. So I'll execute this. Let's see what happens. Internal server error again. It's an internal server error. So let's see what the new error is. Input should be a valid integer, but we use UUID. Okay, so there is an issue somewhere with the ID as well. Okay, so going back to our model, the input should be a valid integer. Response ID, this we are having an issue with ID. It should be a valid integer, but then we didn't set it as integer in the database model. We set it as what, a UUID, right? But if you go to the pedantic model, the one that sends data out, we are sending it an integer, which is wrong, right? Here we are going to send it as a string, basically. So if we set that as a string, I'm going to run this again. I think there's going to be an error because the email will be the same, so I'm going to use a different email, Francis. Then I'm executing this. It's still internal server error again. So how do we solve this issue? The error is plenty today. It should be a valid string, but we have inputs and a UUID, right? Yeah. So the UUID is not necessarily a string. I want you to understand that the UUID from the database is not necessarily a string, as you said. It should be um it's a special ID, just a UUID. It's not a, how do I say it? Yeah, it's not um a string. It's a UUID. So you need to have and call it UUID in your user out model. But we need to import this as well, right? So we know how we import UUID. But here we are going to say from UUID import UUID basically. So that will solve this particular issue and then we are okay. Let's try another thing again. So Francis. So I'm going to say Francisca and the email will be francisca@gmail.com. I'm going to execute. Yes. So finally, we have come out with the issue now. So the ID is now not just an integer, but a key, right? A key value. Some way, some secret key is not just going to be an integer. So no one can just guess this to use it to delete anything for us unless the person know the special ID of that particular user. Right? This is how we need to actually approach creating an ID. Let's see the database, what is inside, because we created some that had issues error in this one. So this one is the ID for this is the ID for this is the ID for this. They all have ID, and then bringing the IDs out is not just going to be, so we say ID is now a UUID and they have different keys, right? Yes. So this is how to actually approach things rather using the UUID to create an ID. So we are not going to be using, never use unless otherwise told, right? Never use integer for your IDs. Just set it up so that it will be using the UUID rather. A very powerful key way of getting an identifier, because that thing will be going out. It's something that you can use to do stuff in the database. So when you're sending it out, make sure it is keyed or made like this instead of it being just an ID. Okay. So this is how to use UUID. You can try create more users and I see your database table. You see they'll be very much different from one another. So in the next session, let's continue adding more concepts.